85% of all churches spend no money on marriage ministry. $0. 85%. That means only 15% of churches are valuing marriages enough to spend money on them.
What's good? Welcome back to the Revive Podcast. I am your host, Fredy Romero, and I am so excited that you're with us once again, wherever you are consuming this podcast. We are excited that you're here. I'm excited because of our guest today. But if you've yet to subscribe on YouTube and you watch us on YouTube, go ahead and do that right now. And if you can hit that bell notification button, that way you're just aware of every time we drop a new clip, a new episode, so that you don't miss anything that we're doing here on the Revive Podcast. And if you're listening to this on audio, please leave us a rating and a review. Like I ask you guys every single week. This helps us much more than you could ever imagine. So please, rating and a review wherever you are at. Now, as you know, on this podcast, we want to help you live out your redemptive purpose in your circles of influence. And in this new season at Revive, we want to just showcase and highlight some of the amazing leaders and people that we have here living out their redemptive purpose in their circles of influence. Now, sometimes we could think that this is an individualistic task or mission, but I would love to present to you the idea that we could do it. For those of us that are married, we could do it together as one. And so on the episode today, we have two amazing guests, two people that are no strangers to our Revive community. You've seen them, you've heard about them. Robert and Beth Aboites are with us today on the podcast. And let me just tell you a little bit about them. They've been married for 30 years and have raised 3 boys, 2 of whom are now married and have children of their own. They are very present, and this is absolutely true because I and my wife and I got to be a part of their life group for a few years. We know that they are very present in their grandchildren's life. And so Robert and Beth have been involved in teaching, mentoring, and journeying with married couples for over 20 years. They have led small groups with a focus on marriage, held marriage workshops, spoken at marriage retreats, run multiple marriage events, mentored and counseled many couples, and have also written a premarital mentoring program that they have walked numerous young couples through. They have also given us so many evenings, so many impromptu sessions over dinner, and they've done that for so many couples here at Revive. Robert and Beth have a heart to see marriages strengthened in order to create healthy families for generations to come. And at the end of this episode, we're going to talk about some of the ways that they'll be doing that for our Revive community. So about Robert and Beth, I am so immensely excited that you guys are on the Revive Podcast with me today.
Man, thanks for having us, Fredy. We've been talking about this for a long time, so we're excited to just spend some time having a conversation and sharing a little bit about our marriage journey and also just how we can help other couples with their marriage journey.
Yeah, it's very exciting to us to be able to speak into other lives.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I just had a conversation with Pastor Noemi. I know that episode just dropped, a couple of weeks ago, but I had a conversation that I've been here at Revive and part of the Revive community for almost 6 years now. And one of the things that permeates, there's always clues about things. Like if something's legitimate, it leaves clues everywhere. And one of the things that I quickly found out coming to the Revive community was who shepherds couples, who who is like the emergency room, who is counseling, who is mentoring young couples, seasoned couples that are now remarrying, who's got them in their life groups. And the all roads pointed to the Aboites family. Nice. It's a beautiful thing. And so I'm so excited. But how did that come about? Because it's one thing to want to do something, and it's another thing to actually do it and do it well, that then you become known for it. How did that come about in your guys' relationship?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for saying seasoned couples as opposed to elder couples.
Try my best.
I appreciate that label. I think this is our own marriage journey and just what God has brought us through. We feel like we always say, we check a lot of boxes. We come from a blended family. We're blended culturally as well. I'm Latino, she's white. We have stepkids and we have biological kids together. And we've been through a lot in our marriage. And we just kind of realized that God has brought us through so many things that it would be a shame for us not to share them with other couples.
I think also we're very transparent, always have been, just with each other and in our friendships with other people. And as we have conversations with other married couples in the church, and they feel comfortable because we're open and transparent, they may hit on something, and we've been quick to say, hey, you know what? Give us a call. Let's just chat over coffee. Let's talk about it. And couples have taken us up on that, I think. And through that process, we've had the opportunity to spend so much time with couples at all walks and stages in their marriages, and it's been really beautiful.
So that's interesting to me, because is that something you learned, a skill like the vulnerability and honesty and transparency? Is that a skill that you guys developed? Is that something that you guys agreed upon together? Or is that just your nature to just be an open book?
I mean, I think it's a little of both, right? I think by nature, Beth is a sharer. If you know her, she
people
loves.
People that know me know.
Yeah, people that know her know that she'll share anything you ask her to. And so I think just naturally she's that way. I am not so much that way. I've always been a lot more guarded, but I think she has taught me how to be more vulnerable and more transparent, just in the way that she approaches life and the way that she approaches conversations with people and with me as well. So I would say that, she's really taught me more than I've taught her about transparency.
And so having this opportunity to just have at what point did you guys see like, hey, we like doing this, or we're called to do this? At what point, did you guys start to notice like, hey, there's something here in regards to mentoring couples, having conversations with couples?
I think a lot of it comes from the couples themselves, who we sit down with and can have a couple of conversations and give them some tools that might be helpful to them. And a month later, they can come back to us and say, oh my gosh, just that one tool or that one thing you said, or that one thing you allowed us to share with you has really changed the trajectory of our marriage. And that's so encouraging to us. That's exciting to us. And so we want to continue to be available to those couples.
Yeah, I think God has used couples to speak that into our life, just by their encouragement and their constant exhortation, like, oh, you guys should do something about this, or you guys should do more of this. And so I think we've listened to that and not necessarily heard the couples, which we are grateful for that, but we've heard God in that too, saying, hey, I want you to do something with this.
Definitely.
I do think that sometimes, a temptation of my generation, the millennial generation, is want to have instant gratification and to speed things up, right? And so, I mean, sometimes we have people that aren't even married trying to give relationship advice, newlyweds writing books just because they have tens of thousands of followers on social media and they're writing books on marriage. I mean, could you speak onto maybe some of the issues that brings about when, I am going to use the word season because, season does happen. Could you speak into that? Because I do think that there is value in having some experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think biblically, we're always encouraged to always be discipling somebody, right? Just you should have somebody who's older than you discipling you, and then somebody younger that you are discipling, right? We need to be disciples who make disciples. And so I think biblically there's a model there that says that we should always have that in our life, right? A more seasoned, more experienced, somebody who's gone through more things in their life, that have learned from them and gained wisdom from that. So I think that's very valuable. I think the danger in just jumping out too early, and it's not to say that they haven't learned some valuable lessons that they can share with the world, but and again, not to get into the details of it, but there was a book that was all about purity culture, written by a very young individual. And that book took off in the church, in the kingdom, and it became almost a theology for a lot of churches to like, oh, we need to live this way. And that individual has since recanted a lot of the stuff that has, been put out in that book. And we're now finding that a lot of the ways that churches have implemented that was actually more harmful than helpful. So I think it's important that, it's okay to listen to younger people who might have, be in the same season and maybe learn some things. But when it comes to thinking about, well, how is this going to look in the future? I think you have to look to the couples who have already been there.
Wow. That's so as you say that, one of the things that has been highlighted, not just through our conversations, but also visiting other churches around our country, is the lack of resources and equipping and attention that churches give marriages. Why do you guys hold marriages in such high regard?
Well, I mean, for me, I'll just speak for myself. When I look at Scripture, the entirety of Scripture is built on a relationship, a very special relationship between God and his creation, and then obviously between the man and the woman that God created. And throughout Scripture, you see the language of marriage. You see God referring to Israel in that way. You see, obviously, in the New Testament, the bride and the church, right? Or the church is the bride and Jesus is the bridegroom. And so just in my faith journey, I've seen that God really puts this importance on it. Not to say that we want to minimize or negate single people or a single life,
right,
because Paul talks about the importance and the value of that and how important that is to the kingdom as well. But I think for us as a married couple, we realize, wow, this is really important to the heart of God. And so if it's important to him, it should be important to us. And we need to make sure that we invest in our own marriage, but also invest in the marriages of others.
I also think too that there are so many different seasons in marriage. It's each couple may be in a particular season. I have young children, and so I'm concerned about how I am right now. Or I have teenagers, and I'm concerned about how I parent and handle my marriage at the same time. And then there's the season when everybody goes away, and it's just the two of you, and you're left. Mm-hmm. And based on how you have handled your marriage all those years while you were very much turned in on things other than yourself, your children, jobs, economics, that kind of thing, you can get to that point and lose yourself and lose each other. And so I think in the church, having something that speaks to all of that, and coming from us, when we look back at where we were at the time when we were raising our children, if we had written a book then, it would be very different than the book we would write now about that particular time in our life. We can look back and say, wow, I didn't do this the way I know I could have done it now that I've been through it. Yeah. And I think that that's what's so huge, is to be able to have been through all of those stages and those seasons in our marriage. And hey, we've been through it. We've been through it. So we have a lot to share in that regard.
So seeing how you guys have now your hearts are inclined to pay attention to marriages, why is it a problem for churches? I don't know if you guys, I think you shared some numbers with me about, churches. Why is it a problem when churches don't pay attention to marriages?
Yeah, well, I mean, just statistically, Barna Research just came out this year with a study on they call it the state of marriage ministry in churches. And one of the things they said was that 85% of all churches, now this is both Protestant and mainline churches, but 85% of all churches spend no money on marriage ministry.
$0.
$0. 85%. That means only 15% of churches are valuing marriages enough to spend money on them. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have something, but the point is that, when we're spending in the church a lot of money on big productions, big events, right? We spend a lot of money on Easter and Christmas, and that's all fine. Yeah. But if the future of the church is really healthy families, because obviously everybody's represented in that, both, the well-seasoned adult as well as the adults that are in their prime, and then also children and teenagers, then what you want a healthy families to be part of your church. Right. Healthy families build healthy communities, right? And so the fact that we're not spending any money, that we're not putting dollars to the thing that we always say is one of the most important things, I mean, it's no wonder that we have 40% of children being born to single parents or in single parent families rather. And aside from the fact that 85% don't spend any money on it, 72% of these churches, of all churches, don't have a substantive marriage ministry at all. So that's almost, 3/4 of our churches don't put any attention to marriage ministry.
Why do you think that? I mean, we're getting into the nitty-gritty, but I just want to take a prayer, I want to pause real quick right here. Why do you think that happens in churches? That it seems like you would want to build your church on the health of healthy families, yet we're not paying attention to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a much deeper conversation, sure. But I think on the surface, if things seem well, then why do you need to spend any money on it? If I'm getting if I'm getting the kind of response that I'm looking for, if my Sunday services are full, if my budget's being fulfilled, and I'm doing that without marriage ministry, then why would I bother,
That's
right?
what you're saying. Yeah.
If you're already in a place where you're comfortable enough with what you're experiencing from the families in your church, then there's almost a sense that, well, there must not be anything wrong because, they're coming, they're tithing, they're participating, and so therefore we don't really need to provide any, additional resources or help to that.
I think also because the additional resources aren't being provided, the couples that come into church aren't asking for a whole lot of help because they don't want to portray that they have issues. And many of them don't have issues. Good. I mean, we saw a lot of it during COVID when the churches shut down. And during that period of time in our own church, many, many couples split up because they didn't have any kind of foundation or education in terms of what a godly marriage looks like and how God manifests himself in that marriage between that couple. Yeah. And they don't know necessarily what to ask for. We find that all the time when we talk to couples and are able to give them some of our experiences with how God has worked within our marriage. They'll say to us, oh my gosh, we have those same issues and we never even thought that was something that could change based on how we move forward in our marriage with God and with the church family.
Yeah.
I think that's an actually better point than what I made, which is that there's probably still somewhat of a culture of shame in the church that you don't want to raise your hand and go, yeah, we're suffering or our marriage is a problem or whatever. You come to Sunday and you want to put on your best front, you want to make sure that people don't kind of know you're not exposed to the stuff that's going on at home. And so, I think, we say this all the time, right? I think there's a lot of suffering and isolation, right? And it's not just about an individual suffering and isolation. I think there are marriages who are suffering in isolation as well. And it's because we haven't provided the kind of community that they can heal in.
Right. So we talked about, why you guys pay attention to marriages, why churches should pay attention to marriages. Let's talk to the married couples for a second right now. Why should they pay attention to the marriages? Because some people are on that state right now where they're like, man, I should be raising my hand and asking for help. And there are probably married couples right now that is just like, well, it's not broken. Why fix it? Why address this? Why pay attention to it? I've got so many other things on my plate right now. Why should married couples pay attention to their own marriages?
Yeah, I think, I'll take a first stab at it, but I think that the reason you should pay attention to your marriage is even if you think it's good, you don't want to sacrifice good for great. Like you want an opportunity to live in full abundance that Jesus promised. And that goes for our marriages as well. Like we're realizing even now, like how good marriage could really be. And I think if you're satisfied with good, you don't ever get to experience the greatness of God being present in your marriage and in your families. So, I think that's one aspect of it is that, okay, I'm glad you're doing well, but wouldn't you want to do better?
Yes.
Right. I think when, we apply that to our work, to our business, right? We always want to advance. We always want to grow. We always want to move, even our spiritual life. Oh, I want to grow. I want to do more. But we don't tend to want more from our marriages. We tend to get to a place where we're happy or complacent and we're like, oh, this is good enough. And what we're trying to ring the bell about is like, no, it could be so much better.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful to kind of like, let people know, let married couples know what's possible.
Yeah.
I think also we get so jaded, and I remember when, again, my generation growing up with all these Disney movies and all the fairy tales for both, there's like stereotypical roles that you need to play. And for men, it was that. But then you just, through life, you start to just dismiss fairy tale likeness, right? Of what love can be in encountering someone. But those movies never talked about they always ended with them getting together. That's it. And then they show you the next 40 years.
Yeah. I also think you have, with the divorce rate the way it is, and that you're either going to get a divorce or, okay, you're willing to stick it out. And so for those couples that think that they start believing that they have an okay marriage because they know they're committed. They know that they're going to stick it out. And that's not going to change. But in the midst of all of that, it can be so much better and greater for them, for their children, for them during, like I spoke about before, during the seasons in their lives when they're going to turn around and look at each other someday and go, whoa, we were so invested in these other things. Also, I think the thing about the seasons of your life is how you relate in the midst of those. When you have toddlers, you're tired. And so you have a tendency to have more and not energy, but the ability to argue more about how things go. You end up having teenagers, and you're both on a different page about how to handle that teenager, what kind of disciplinary action, how to deal with how they're growing up. And if you have stepkids, that's a whole other added. And many, many people like us have that as well. Yeah. So you have all of these things that build on themselves, and in the midst of all that, you lose each other in that. You lose the two of you together as one in the midst of that. You become very separate entities that are living together and making it work for all of these different stages in your life. And the marriage is number one. The kids come number two. Actually, God is number one. Yes. But it's about this relationship here and how you can make it flourish in the midst of all the different seasons.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask because, then do you guys see a pattern in the conversations you've already had with married couples or are having with married couples that, dissatisfaction exists, but we just accept it as a part of life? Like, I'm not completely happy in my marriage, but hey, I'm committed to you. And so, I'm trying to make it work. Do you guys see that acceptance and, what's the issue with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do see that. I think we see that couples get used to a routine, or they get used to life a particular way, right? And if you get numb to that, it's really easy to just be like, okay, well, this, it's too much work, it's too hard to get better, but I can tolerate this, and so I'm just gonna, tolerate it until I have to actually do something about it. Yeah. And so for a lot of them, it's the idea of just existing versus thriving. Right? We don't want married couples to think about just how do we exist? How do we get through this season with our kids? How do we get through the next season, our building season? How do we get to our saving season? How do we get to, this retirement season? Like, you're just trying to get to the next thing. Like, you're just existing, trying to reach the end. But at the end of the day, you're going to get there and you're going to find that something's missing. Right? I'll give you an analogy.
Please.
And you could probably relate to this as much as I can, but imagine you're taking your family on a vacation, right? Yeah. And it's super exciting. When you announce the vacation, you're like, hey, we're going to Hawaii. It's going to be amazing. Hawaii's got all this beautiful stuff, right? When we get there, we're going to have the best time. But what starts to happen? You start arguing about the packing. You start arguing about when you're leaving. You start arguing about if you're driving somewhere, right? That car ride sometimes can be absolutely horrible. You're yelling at your kids. You're yelling at each other. Like, the dad doesn't want to stop on the way. Everybody else wants it, right? It's like a horrible journey.
Yeah.
And that you get there and you're like, okay, we're here. We're going to have a good time. And you realize, like, man, I just spent 6 hours in a car miserable, and now you want me to have a good time? That's what happens with marriages, is we keep thinking, hey, when we get to the destination, then we'll enjoy each other. Then we won't have all of these things in a way, and everything will be great. And we're finding couples that get there and go, oh man, did we ever even really know each other? Ooh. Like, we realize that, man, we've been working together, but we have not really been connecting for all these years. And sometimes we're talking 10, 15, 20 years of marriage. And you get to that place where you're like, whoa, man, we don't really have what we thought we had.
That's scary. So that's a scary place to be in. And I mean, if someone is listening to this right now, and this is just hitting just way too close to home, what is the hope? What is the hope for them then right now? Because, man, that would suck.
I'll give you an example. Last night, we had a Zoom call with a couple that we're really close to. They're not Revived people. They don't even live in this state. But we've journeyed with them through a lot. And they're great. We just wanted to catch up. Nothing about marriage. We just wanted to catch up, see how they were. They wanted to catch up with us. And we had this long conversation about many, many different things. And at the end, they said, well, it's so good to talk to you. And we said, well, how are you guys doing? And his answer was, you know what, we could use some work right now on our marriage. And his exact words were, we're not going anywhere. I love my family. I love my wife. She loves me. And she's right there smiling and laughing too. But we've had some obstacles that we really, need to work through. And so we said to them, well, think about it, talk about it, and come up with some things you want to talk about and call us back. Let's have some conversation. And they were so thrilled about that. But the thing about that is this is a couple we've journeyed with who recognize in their marriage when it's time to reboot and regroup, because we have to do that. 30 years in, we have to reboot and regroup at times. It's never that you learn some tools and then you're perfect forever. It's that you have to have this awareness. You educate yourself about this awareness that you have, and you're ready to either ask for conversation with someone else that can kind of walk you through some things. But you can also, as a couple, not be afraid to communicate with each other about the fact that I'm not feeling so happy right now. Let's talk through that.
Yeah.
It's huge, and that's a couple that had been given tools over the years to know how to be honest that way.
Yeah.
That's what we want to do, is give couples these tools that they have. So when they have those times that they have to change things up or reboot, as I said before, the flags are there, and they're going to immediately go to that and feel comfortable doing it.
For you guys, I mean, what would be some of those signs for you, Beth, that you're like, hey, we need to reboot, we need to pay attention, we need to pause and talk about our marriage? What are some of those signs?
Well, I think Robert and I are very, very different people. I'm very extroverted in terms of wanting to have conversation and talk and do that kind of thing within our marriage. He's very introverted. And when work is stressful for him, he becomes more introverted. And that it's hard for me. That's always been one of our biggest issues, is that part of communication. I need more from him. And so we have to take moments where we can, and we've learned over the years, he's the first one to come to me and hold me and say, forgive me for not giving you what you need in this or in that. But I'm able to a certain extent, I'm working on it still, be able to let him know when I need more. And I'm learning how to let him be when he needs his space to be able to process internally. It's things you learn over the years.
Yeah, and I think to put it bluntly, the quickest thing that is an identifier that we need to regroup or reboot is irritability. When we start becoming irritated by each other, that's the first sign, literally the first sign that something is wrong. And so a lot of times what happens is couples will, might be having a great relationship, and then they start irritating each other, but they never explore, well, why is that happening? And you just kind of get used to it, and then it goes from irritability to frustration, and then from frustration to anger, and then maybe anger to depression, and it just keeps building if you don't deal with it, right? It's kind of like the oyster and the pearl, right? When it has something that irritates it just starts building something around it instead, so that it doesn't get irritated by it anymore. Well, we don't want to do that with our marriages, right? We want to expel the irritation, and deal with it right away. So for us, that's the primary thing. The minute either one of us is irritated with the other, we know, like, okay, something's wrong. We need to deal with this.
I want to focus. So we're going to talk about, what's launching here, but I want to focus on the fact that you guys keep talking about conversations with couples, the conversations God has with his people, and it being represented by marriage. Yeah. The fact that if you guys see signs, the first thing you guys do is have a conversation. Because I've heard from other couples, when they're stressed, they're tired, they feel like, oh, we're disconnected. They're like, vacation. We need a vacation. Yeah. Oh, you know what we need to do? We need to have date nights, and like, we want that solution, a silver bullet. You're right. So we want to find that. So how is it? And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. I'm just saying, like, sometimes we go to those things immediately because they do bring some sort of satisfaction in the moment, or at least give us the illusion, like, hey, we're back together. We get intimate in these isolated places, romantic spaces. We have a conversation because we're having a great meal. So for the first time in a long time, we're looking at each other in the eyes. But then again, have a date night and an expensive meal every night. You can't be on vacation forever, you know? So why is it that how did you guys learn that conversations is the basis of, you know, rebooting and have like problem solving in your marriage?
Yeah. Well, that's actually exactly it, right? It is problem solving for us, because I think we realized early on in our marriage that whenever we were irritated with each other, like typically the thing that was irritating us wasn't really the thing that was causing the irritation, right? So the irritation is a symptom of something else. And we've, I think, learned over the years to, hey, let's get beyond the symptom. Because again, these, you know, date nights and all those are great tools. Sometimes we can kind of use them as a balm to try to alleviate, you know, put on our skin to alleviate the symptom, but it's not really curing the thing that's causing it. And so we, in our conversations, that's what we try to get to, is what is actually causing the irritation. Sometimes it could be something really simple. Oh, you're just stressed at work. Okay, I can show you grace for that, you know, because it's a season or it's a hard week or whatever. And so she shows me a lot of grace in that case, right? But sometimes it could be something deeper, like, oh, something's been building, you know, because we're not always great at having the conversation. Sometimes, you know, I hold on to stuff or she'll hold on to stuff until it becomes, you know, frustrating, right? We move beyond the irritation to frustration, and then it comes out. So
Which happened this week, actually.
Yes.
A couple days ago.
I know.
So, I mean,
It did.
we're
Real talk.
We're not.
Yeah. As we were preparing
it happens
for
to us too.
Yeah. So, and I think, you know, we try not to use the, you know, oh, I've had a hard week, I've had, you know, all those things, right, as an excuse to be like that with each other. We're like, it's still not okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's important that we address those things and ask for forgiveness. Not to say that it's not going to happen again, but the more it happens, the more we recognize it, the more we have conversation about it, the more we realize that, oh, you know what? You're not really trying to hurt me. You just don't know how to process what you're going through, or you just need a little grace, or you need some comfort, or you just need me to serve you in a different way for this season. And so we try to, you know, look for sometimes those angles, right, as well. It's not always a conversation that's going to solve it. Sometimes we just get over stuff, but we can get over it because we believe that we are for each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That we care about each other and that we value each other.
And I think in our situation too, we had 20 years ago a really rough patch in our marriage, really rough, and we share that with couples. Yeah. But that was sort of the beginning of realizing that if we don't fix this, we're not going to stay together. Yeah. And it was a painful time for both of us, and so, and couples go through those things and don't have the tools or I don't know, by the grace of God, we got through that, and we had a godly family community around us, and not everybody has that. That's the kind of thing we're hoping we can share in, so that couples don't have to hit rock bottom in order to like fight their way back. Yeah. That they can get past it before that happens.
Someone listening to this, Beth and Robert, like they're like, okay, like, I mean, you guys look together, you guys sound good together, like. I mean, but my husband is not Robert and my wife is not Beth. If I want to bring something up and have a conversation, like they just shut me down. What is then the encouragement or the proactivity that person can take that wants to have a conversation about their marriage, that wants to approach those ruts in their marriage, but their spouse is like completely shut down to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a like a tip or a tool or a trick, right? I can say, like, there are things that you can do to communicate better or to approach a conversation, but what we think is that there's something deeper at the root of what's happening in the marriages, not just in our church but in general, and that is that we feel there's like what we call a spiritual, an emotional, and even a practical malnourishment in our marriages. And so they're just malnourished. They're not being fed the right amount of the right kinds of things to help these conversations happen. And so that's part of what we've been dreaming about and praying about, and God has been, kind of giving us some wisdom about here, launching, is this idea of journeying with couples together, inviting them to journey with us as we have what we're calling these marriage conversations, yes, where we talk about some of these things. But at the core of what has allowed us to get to this place is the idea that we need to live in this, what we call this state of oneness. And that's at the core of everything that we do. It's at the core of how we have conversations. It's at the core of how we make decisions. Being in oneness, which is really rooted in Genesis 2:24, where it says, the man and wife shall come together and they shall become one flesh. Yeah. So there's this idea of oneness, which is the short definition that we have of it is like basically living and moving as one in motive, purpose, value, and goals. So when you can learn to do that, when you learn that we're actually for each other, like we want to see each other thrive. I want to see Beth healthy. I want to see her whole. I want to see her, feel good about herself, and I want her to feel valued, and she does for me as well. When you can get to that place, then your whole life becomes, this God-centered movement toward this idea of oneness that he's asking us for.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. I wanted to, so the three places for nourishment, you said they're spiritual, practical, and
emotional.
Can you briefly just touch on that? Because I think that just really piqued my interest, that those are places that could be malnourished in our marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the spiritual one. The spiritual malnourishment is just the idea that couples don't have enough what we call God conversations. I think most of the time, one or the other spouse is on this spiritual trajectory that is, let's say faster and moving deeper than the other one. And so one of two things will happen. Either you'll try to catch up to that person and then feel like, oh, I can't because they're moving too fast, or you'll just give up. And so there's a malnourishment there spiritually, that both couples aren't really having the same God conversations. And we always like to say it's, when you're on your spiritual journey as a couple, because this was our story as well, is that you don't have to be on the same page, but you have to be in the same book. And so as long as you're committed to that, you can then be constantly feeding your marriage and yourself spiritually, so that you guys can come together spiritually and have more God conversations.
Oh, so good. And what about the emotional and practical side of nourishment for your marriage?
I mean, I think for the emotional side, we talk a lot about sacrificial love, and placing our spouse above ourselves. And some people might look at that and say, well, I should be placed where they're placed, but they're also placing you above themselves. It works both ways. And so when you're both placing each other above yourself, and there's this sacrificial love that you have for each other, you find that emotionally things will change. Things will become lighter. Things will and become deeper, actually, in many ways, where you're able to help feed each other emotionally in a way that you weren't able to before. You're hearing each other. You're listening to each other, and you're not threatened by each other. That's huge in a marriage, to not be threatened by the other what the other person really wants for you. You have to know that they want the best for you. And that can change everything emotionally.
And what about the practicality side of it? What does that entail?
When we say practical malnourishment, what we're saying is that couples typically don't have role models that they can look up to, especially in our urban spaces. There's not enough examples of good, healthy marriages. And along with that are the tools to actually build those good, healthy marriages. So a lot of couples don't know how to have like you said, how do I approach that conversation? How do I deal with conflict? How do I talk about intimacy, right? Or what should intimacy look like? I mean, I think, again, we throw the typical things that we do is like, oh, you guys should have a date night, or let's do a marriage event, or you should go to a marriage retreat. It's kind of like the silver bullet that we're looking for. But the reality is that the practice of marriage is a daily thing. It's something that you have to do every day. And so the practical malnourishment that happens is that we are not practicing how to be married every day. Most couples are not. I mean, we do because we feel forced to, because of, the mission that God has us on.
Keeps us
it'd be hard for us to, to say one thing and then not live it out. Right. So it almost kind of exposes us in a different way, because we have to, both of us have a very high integrity value. And so it would be really hard for either of us to be telling you something here and living out something different.
Yeah.
So that keeps us honest, right? But again, the practical malnourishment is that we just don't practice how to be married every day.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be foolish to think that you can have just one big meal one time and not have to eat, you know?
Right. Or show up to a marathon and run it without ever practicing for it, right?
Yeah, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Right. Exactly.
Failure to plan is planning to fail. So,
yep.
Oh man, that is so good. So like, let's talk about our marriage journey. You know, let's talk about, you know, what we're launching here at Revive, what you are leading, you know, and you're the team that you guys are, you know, building. What are some of these details that we could look forward to for those that are part of our Revive community? What are some of the things that they could look forward to in regards to what's happening here, what we're launching?
Well, I mean, I think in just overall, what we're launching is it's really a journey. We're inviting couples to come on a journey with us to learn how to build a singular life together that glorifies God and then helps their families thrive. So how we're looking at it is that we want to provide three things for couples. We want to provide a space for healthy conversations that help us understand what it's like to live in oneness. That's, again, core foundational to us.
Yeah.
The second thing we want to do is that we want to provide community for couples. You know, again, we talked about suffering and isolation. We don't want marriages to suffer in isolation. We want to be able to have them be part of a community that cares about them, community that they can go to where they need encouragement or help, right? Or just, you know, general support. And then the third thing we want to provide is some mentorship. I think initially it's going to be, because we're looking at the long game here.
Yeah.
This is not something we're trying to solve this year. We're thinking, you know, 3 to 5 years out, what we would love to see is a movement of healthy marriages that actually create a promising legacy for generations to come. That's our vision for this. And so we don't want to rush it. You know, it's not, hey, come to this event and have it all figured out, right? It's going to be like, hey, we're going to have a series of conversations over this year. We're going to do them Friday nights, right? And we're going to have a series of conversations where we learn how to be better with each other.
Yeah.
And then we're also going to have these group gatherings where we're not necessarily going to host them all, but we're going to encourage people to have group gatherings in community as couples so that they can begin to build that community. And so, and then we're also asking some couples to journey with us through this process where we're going to give them, for lack of a better term, special attention, you know, to help them become mentors, so that next year we actually have more people doing this than just ourselves. Because we're not trying to build this around us, right? We're trying to build this around the idea of what a biblical marriage toward oneness should look like. And so we need to bring more people along. We need to train them up. We need to help them so that we can launch multiple of these every year. That would be beautiful.
Yes. This is great. Why the need? So here, three things, you know, space for conversations, community, and then mentorship. Let's briefly, you know, why do we need to create space for conversations? Why can't you two just write me, you know, a guide of questions so that I can go to the right tab and, you know, find the one that says, oh, after a big argument, and then say, okay, here's a few questions that Robert and Beth wrote for us. Let's go through them. Why do we need to have a space? I think I know why. And it's a beautiful thing, but why do we need to have a space for conversations?
Well, I would say even for that is because, first of all, the couple would never do that. They'll never go to that 3-ring binder and open up and read those few questions. But we won't do it. Yeah, it's like anything. It's really important for couples to feel comfortable, to be in a space where they're comfortable, not only with other couples, but with us, and themselves and each other. They're in their marriage. And so to be able to provide a space for that and to have conversation, and it's going to be fun. You know, it's going to be fun. It's not heavy duty stuff. It's, you know, it's information for them to use and kind of chew on and to have time before the next time we meet to really work on those things with each other. But they need structure for that. And they need to say, here's some questions. This is what happened in our situation. They'll have that opportunity with the people that are sitting with them, the other couples. I think that's what's so huge, is to give them that space to feel comfortable.
And I think too, how can you have a relationship without conversation, right? When we're trying to build a relationship with God, there's conversation that needs to happen. We read his word, and that's him speaking to us, and then we pray, and that's us speaking to him. So there's conversation there that we cannot build a relationship with God without those two parts of the conversation. For us, our whole marriage, as you suggested earlier, is built on conversation, right? We've learned that conversation is where the best things happen, right? We have, we have God conversations. We have conversations about decisions. We have conversations about finances, about our kids, about our hopes, about our dreams, about why we're feeling the way we're feeling. Like everything for us, it can be solved through a conversation. And so we want to help couples kind of build that spiritual muscle and that emotional muscle and that practical muscle of this is how you have conversations. There will be a teaching component to it, and there will be a practical component to it, but there has to be a conversation component to it as well, because we want couples to get used to talking to each other.
I was going to bring that up. Also, why not just create a class where my wife and I can just come and take notes and then go home and
they can go to a marriage event for that, or a weekend, a marriage retreat. There's plenty of places out there for them to get that, and we would encourage that for couples that want to do that. This is going to be really different, and part of it too is our prayer and our hope is that these couples stay with us the entire year, so that as we meet on these Friday nights, and there's not that many of them, and they have these gatherings outside of those Friday nights, that this same group of people can join later on if they want. That's not a problem. But the ones that will get the most benefit is to do this journey. This is why we're calling it a journey. And when we talk about it as our marriage journey, it is our marriage journey that is, we're hoping will instill in them what their marriage journey, our marriage journey becomes them, not us anymore. And so that's why it's important.
And I love that, your second, I know you said you're looking for long game. So mentorship is something maybe we can talk, because I would definitely want to have you guys back on, the Revive podcast. And there's a couple of things that we're launching to in support of what's happening. But doing life alone as a married couple really sucks. It's already hard as it is. And then doing it alone is very difficult. Having been the recipient of your leadership and shepherding in the form of life group here, but our life group is primarily intentionally comprised of married couples, has been a blessing through, for those who personally know me, but a really difficult season just in life in general, and difficulties of life bleed into marriage. And if your marriage is unhealthy, you start to bleed there. So I will vouch for community, but there are people who may feel like, hey, I don't want anyone knowing what our mess is, or kind of shy to, or I lead a life group and I just feel like, how can we demystify the need for perfectionism, or to show that we've got it all together, so that someone could say, you know what, this is a space that I want to be at.
Yeah, I think we have certain values that we want to operate under with this marriage journey, but one of the values is definitely safety and confidentiality, right? We want to create spaces where those conversations are safe, so that couples begin to get used to having those conversations and sharing those things without feeling judged, right? Or without feeling like, somebody spilled the tea on me, right? Like all of a sudden now everybody knows my business and they're going to be talking about it. For those couples that are going to go with us on this marriage journey, we're going to be really clear about the importance of that confidentiality and that safe space to be able to have those conversations. And that's why, again, also we want to build up other couples who can be that for other couples, right? It would be awesome, but we have only a certain amount of capacity to welcome couples into our home or into our life to have those conversations. And people, by the grace of God, have felt like we're a safe place to have those conversations. But we need more people who are a safe place for people to go to have those conversations. And so that's part of our hope with doing this, is that we will create not just safe spaces, but safe couples that other couples can go to.
And I don't think we don't want this to be set up as a 911 marriage year, because there are counselors and people that are out there that are in positions to be able to help couples that are in a 911 kind of crisis in their marriage. We want to see couples come and be part of this that are in good marriages, that have issues. Obviously, we all have those issues, but can come and join us, have community, have conversation, and have fun, and just and starting to realize how much better things can be for them.
So the first kickoff, we're kicking this off, where we are going to gather people together. Our first initial conversation is the kickoff. And someone's listening to this, what is the prayer that they can have? Do both partners need to be like all in on this? I'm asking some of the questions that maybe go through people's heads, or if one partner's reluctant, or maybe they don't really come to Sunday services, can we still come together as a couple here, even if I come to Sunday services alone? Can you you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think you both as a couple have to be committed in some way, right? Not at the same level, because that's just unrealistic, right? So a lot of times, one couple wants it more than the other, but the other person is willing to, okay, I'm willing to go through this process. You know what? That's up to God how he uses that moment, right? So we welcome that. We're not going to say, oh, you both have to be fully committed or else you can't come to this. Hey, if you both show up, then there's space for God to work, for the Holy Spirit to work. You might hear something, or you might see something that, or experience something, right? That says, you know what, I want to know more about this. I really want to understand how I could be better, how our marriage could be better. This is not something for, just, the spouse who wishes their spouse would come, and so they're going to come and try to learn and then go home and teach their spouse. That's not this.
Got it.
Right? We definitely want to encourage this to be, or actually we're requiring this to be both couples present, because that's the only way really this is going to work.
Yeah. What are some of the details, that maybe we could share on this episode? We're recording this before April, which is the month we're launching this, but this is being broadcasted in April, first week of April. So what are some details that we could, give people in our Revive community about this, that they'll know? Or should the only detail be, hey, come on the kickoff and explore that? Do we need a hard commitment before then? What do we need to transmit here?
Now, I think the April launch is really kind of an information meeting. Really, it's come and find out what this is all about. So you can come to the April launch and not commit to it still, but it's your opportunity to find out, what is this? What does it look like? What are the conversations we're going to be having? What are the gatherings look like, right? What does mentorship look like? It's an opportunity for you to ask all the questions about it before you commit, right? So for us, that was really important, that we help couples understand what we're asking them to commit to. Because again, we don't want this to be yet another, to be looked at as, oh, we're doing 4 events and I'll come to the ones that I want to and not the other ones. We're saying, no, come to, just journey with us for the whole year. Come to these conversations, come to some of the gatherings, right? Get to know some of the other couples, get to hear what our life is like and how we've gotten here by the grace of God and the things that God has taught us. We want to share those with you, right? Scripture says that what you have learned from me, right? Teach others, and other capable people who can teach others. So we want that opportunity to really share all of the things that God has been teaching us through our own marriage, and freely kind of just give those away to people so that their marriages can be strengthened. But we're asking them to stick it out with us, to come on the journey with us, because one event is just not going to do it.
Right.
And I do think that being able to come to that, there's a lot of new couples in our church that we don't know. And having people come give us an opportunity for them to get to know who we are, so they'll get a better understanding of kind of how it's going to look for the year.
Well, this is exciting. I mean, we love our whole team is excited for this. all of us that have been blessed by your mentorship and conversations with you, we're excited for this. And so we will definitely be there as well. What is the hope? What is, like, just to finalize this conversation, what is the hope that you expect, from God? What is that hope that you expect for marriages here at Revive?
Well, I think, again, our hope is that we will help couples to build this spiritual, emotional, and practical resilience in their marriage, so that we can see a future where this church and the community is full of healthy marriages that then leave a legacy for generations to come, right? We need to break these cycles of divorce. We need to break the cycles of brokenness in our own marriage. The one thing that I think we don't ever give enough value to as married couples, especially married couples, well, not especially, but married couples with children, right, is that what we're living out now, our kids are going to reap. So if we're living out brokenness, trauma, if we're fighting all the time, if we're arguing, if there's constant tension, our kids pay that price, not just as children, but as adults. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that in our own children as well. We've seen some of the things that happen early on in our relationship that, of course, you can never take it back, right? But that we see the effects of how our relationship caused some of the thinking, some of the way that even our own, sons, because we raised 3 boys, how our own sons view their spouses and treat their spouses. Now, thankfully, again, by the grace of God, there's probably more good than bad. But I think that we have to realize that our relationship with each other is setting the example for our children. And we can't sit here and go, well, I didn't have a good example, and so therefore I'm going to be a bad example. That's the typical cycle, right? Yeah. I would say if you are that couple that grew up with not a good example, not healthy parents, marriages, then you change that cycle. You be that healthy example for your children, so that for generations, your kids and their kids and your grandkids can live in healthy cycles of marriage.
Beautiful. If someone listens to this after April, because this lives on, and someone searching for answers, or someone who's new to our church and just starts to binge watch and binge listen, because that does happen as well. People will listen to multiple episodes of the Revive podcast and they miss the launch. Can they still join? Did they miss out? They have to wait till next year?
Yes, of course. They can join at any time. Okay. We welcome that.
All right, it's just that commitment. So Robert, Beth, thank you guys so much for being here, giving us your time, your insight. There's many things I want to talk to you guys about, so I'm glad that we're going to be able to have you guys in a future. But one of the things I do want to talk about is redemptive purpose as a married couple. How do you live that out? Because it's obvious that you discovered it, and I have questions about do my wife and I, if we're one, and I'm sorry, maybe you guys might even touch on this in the conversations, but I would love to have you guys on the podcast to talk about that, because I think that's just a beautiful illustration of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us and letting us talk about this. It is so important to us.
We look forward to this very much.
Awesome. And so you've heard it here, this is exciting. This is exciting. If you are not excited right now and you're nervous, that's a good place to be at too. If you're nervous about wanting to jump in, wanting to commit to this journey, let me encourage you right now. I was once in your shoes too. There were moments where I was having conversations with this beautiful couple that's in front of me right now, and I was nervous because they were asking questions, and my wife is honest, and I was very nervous. And I thank God that we answered their questions with honesty, both separately and collectively. And so I encourage you to sign up, send us a DM, send us an email. If you listen to this after Sunday service, and it's during the week, connect with the QR code. Don't miss it. Plug in, connect. You do not want to let this experience go by. You've been praying for it. You've been hoping for it, but you can hope the best for your marriage. But if you don't take action, nothing will come out of it. So please do that. Thank you so much for joining us on the Revive podcast today. Again, if you've not subscribed, please do so. It helps us so much. Now, go live out your redemptive purpose in your circles of influence, knowing that God is with you. God bless.